Okay, welcome back. And we're rolling right through Monday. Dr. Bill Deagle joins us as he does every week for an update on the Fukushima catastrophe, which is, as we have been reporting, only getting worse. And it's interesting to see the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and now Time Magazine finally stepping back up to the plate. Oh, Americans love those sports metaphors. To deliver a little bit of news about something we've been reporting now for 2 months. And that is simply that the situation there is horrific and going to only get worse. Welcome back, Bill.
Yeah, welcome back, Jeff. This situation is even worse than our worst calculations. I mean,
yeah, we did our best.
As bad as we thought it was, and we were trying not to exaggerate, it is right. Orders of magnitude worse than we expected.
Yeah.
I've spent quite a bit of time today talking to Chris Harris, and I posted up on both NutriMedical and Clay and Iron on the top story an extensive review of what Chris's latest analysis of the situation is, and it's over the top. I mean, tomorrow, the Japanese government and TEPCO are going to announce their new schedule for so-called controlling the situation. And they're going to have to be quite the storytellers, because there's no way in hell that they're going to have control of this situation this year.
No chance. Or
there's
next.
no chance. I mean, this is a situation which is now way out of control. This is like having all the radiation without the cities on fire from a third nuclear war. That's the amount of radiation we're talking about here. We're not talking about Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a small pit fire in the middle of the Ukraine. This is way, way worse than that. And the amount of radiation going into the Humboldt or Black Current, the amount of radiation coming across the northern hemisphere, the amount of spewed plutonium up to 50 kilometers away, and all of these reactors, and this is the real kicker, is reactor number 1 was already damaged and leaking the containment vessel with the earthquake before the tsunami even struck. Right. And we're certain that many reactors, including Hamaoka, which now had 400 tons of seawater somehow in unit number 5, we know that there's numerous reactors that probably suffered extreme earthquake damage. And there's certain parts of these reactors, whether it's old materials, annealed with neutron insertion, or just age. There's fire suppression systems that break down more quickly than anything else. And many of these are put in places where they're built, like the Hamaoka reactor unit number 5 that was right on a fault line. Instead of decommissioning them, they relicensed them. So their shares are falling now that the Japanese government, is announcing they're going to back up with public money these losing situations. It's like throwing all your money into a pit of volcanic fire.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. It's totally crazy.
And it's going to, the Japanese economy is toast. And it's going to be more toast because now we're having brownouts throughout the central industrial area of Japan, where many of the big car manufacturers, Toshiba's chip manufacturing plants, et cetera, are going to be harmed. And they're one of the chief buyers after China of our debt because of interlocking world debt, which means the dollar is toast this year. Dollar is toast. Japan is toast. We're next. This happened in 1927. A big tsunami and earthquake struck Japan. 2 years later, we had the 1929 crash. All, by the way, and I'm not saying that this is caused by HAARP, which is another pile of garbage. It's earth changes. But as Rom the Cruel, I call him Emmanuel, now the king of Chicagoland, of the chief mobster,
Sam Giancana would be jealous.
Sabbatean, I don't want to use the word Jew, because the word Jew means praisers. It means praiser of the Most High God. They're not Jews. As Jesus Christ himself would say, they are of the synagogue of Satan.
It's a satanic issue, and it has been, and unfortunately no one understands it. Meanwhile, back here, we'll get right back to Fukushima. Our own Nuclear Regulatory Commission, ever vigilant watchdog that it is.
Oh, yeah. They're wonderful.
Has been now found to be routinely waiving fire suppression rule violations at nearly half of the nation's 104 commercial reactors, even though fire presents one of the chief hazards at all nuclear plants. The policy, the result of a series of little-noticed decisions in recent years, little noticed, folks, because the media won't touch it, is meant to encourage nuclear companies to remedy long-standing fire safety problems, but critics say it is leaving decades-old fire hazards in place.
Yeah,
as
like
the
electrical
NRC
fires.
Fails to enforce its rules, right.
Yeah, they even had, and we exchanged this information earlier today. They even have one nuclear plant near the Illinois-Iowa border that could be affected by flooding, and their plan is to open the doors to let the flood come through the building and to raise up on a hoist on chains the diesel backup generator to run the condenser to keep the reactor from going Fukushima. Now, if that isn't crazy...
No, it doesn't get any crazier. If you and I had to sit down and try and make this up, we couldn't. It's too crazy. And it's a testimonial to how utterly stupid this so-called sentient species is.
Well, I think actually it's willingly suicidal. I remember as a trauma doctor taking care of people. At some
level, I agree with you.
Yeah, I think there's some degree of a death wish here, a corporate global
I've been saying that
wish.
For years. Absolutely. You don't do the things that this alleged intelligent species does unless it has some kind of a deep-seated wish to die. I don't get it. It's weird. Yeah. It's totally weird. Think about it. Okay, they make a transportation system. They had electric cars in 1897. Wonderful cars that would do 50 miles an hour and run for, I forgot how long they'd run for, I think almost an hour before they needed to be This is not 1897 now. There was no reason for any, so what did they do? They built an automobile that took clean air and turned it into death, and they devised a poison to propel it which spewed even more deadly vapors out the back. And you know what some of the deadliest vapors coming off automobiles are that you folks sitting on the highways and byways and traffic jams have to breathe? It's the actual decomposition of the rubber tires on your car. That is one of the most deadly substances that automobiles emit, and nobody knows about it. So when you drive down the road, just a word to the wise, never, ever, ever, ever open the outside vents to the interior of your car. Do not do it.
Yeah, always use recirc air.
Always. And you turn your air conditioner on and blow that out the open windows for a minute, and then close your windows. It collects decomposing petrochemical issues in your car, which are toxic, and it can be recirculated. So you want to clear it out of your car first. Okay, now we got a break coming up here. Let's just go right through the break network. I'm not going to stop. If you go to the top of Rense.com or a few other sites, you have to understand, and I think most of you do, that TEPCO is probably one of the worst corporate liars I've come across, and I think you'd agree. They're not good at lying, and they lie by omission, and the omissions are big enough. Their omissions are so huge you could drive a truck through them. Now, their big plan, their big fix-it plan, was to tackle reactor number 1 because it was the most approachable and the most they could deal with it, they felt. So that's really where they pinned their timeline on. Their fix-it-all timeline. Let's get reactor 1 fixed, and then everyone will look the other way, and we can take our time. Reactor 1, as we talked about, when they opened the door, Bill, 500 million becquerels of deadly radiation came roaring out. They weren't expecting that. Now, how dumb can they get? They went in there and found out that there were 700 millisieverts per hour spikes here and there in the building. Well, number 1 went from that to what? What did it go to from 700 millisieverts? Keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, your annual dose maximum is 3 millisieverts a year. So that had 700 spiking inside building 1, and they were sending people in there per hour.
And by the way, it went up even higher to between 1 and
2,000. Yeah. It became 2,000 millisieverts, which translates into 2 full sieverts per hour. That means you walk in alive and you walk out and you're dead.
Yeah. In other words, if you get that amount of radiation to your central nervous system, within minutes you're getting cerebral edema, you're getting seizures and coma, you're getting disorientation and nausea, and within minutes to hours you're dead. There's no such thing as, we're going to rescue you in the neuro ICU, or we're going to do this or that. You are dead. Period. So when they sent that 60-plus-year-old man in there to repair, and they report he was in there to part of this building for 50 minutes, what it tells you is their so-called plans to put in air filtration systems and to put some kind of a air-driven cooling system into the reactors is a fairy tale. And we need to have a new version of books called the TEPCO Fairy Tale.
Cute.
It's really obscene. Now, there's a lot of issues that are swirling around here, and some of them deal with TEPCO, some of them deal with international finance, because they're trying to bury this because the international world debt is so integral that they can't see Japan crashing, but it's going to crash. And if they just have a major explosion, like we know that there's a spike in reactor number 3, which is likely to have a full critical nuclear China syndrome meltdown explosion of a MOX reactor.
How are they going to stop it, Bill? And just basically for our people out there, they decided to supercharge the amount of water they were pushing into that reactor to cool it, and they added boric acid to it, and all it did, it succeeded in driving the temperature of the reactor up 100 degrees Celsius in a matter of one day.
So what they did is they put in inadequate neutron capture, which is borax. They should have used more powerful things such as indium and other materials that can grab the neutrons without water. They should have made nanoparticles of some kind. They should have used the stop the feed and bleed game. And with a MOX reactor that's touchy, this reactor is ready to blow. And we know reactor pool number 3, on top of reactor 3, the MOX reactor, was a nuclear explosion. We know all of the reactors...
Look at the pictures of it. You've seen them.
Yeah. The pressure vessels are all leaking. We know that that there's problems at other reactors throughout Japan where they can't have rolling blackouts or brownouts just from TEPCO and Fukushima. The Daiichi plant as well as the Daini plant are closed. Hamioka, they had problems with the Suruga plant. I guarantee you, if we had full disclosure here, we'd have lots of plants that were just damaged enough that they managed to get cold shutdown of them because they should have been shut down, some of them probably 10 or 20 years ago. And their safety procedures have never been upgraded.
Well, when they admit that they found how much salt water had snuck into the building while they were looking the other way? 400 tons?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is absurd. The water came roaring right up the intake, out of control somehow. And anyway, they're just the worst liars going. Now, what Bill said about Building 3 and Reactor 3 is very important. That spent fuel pool is gone. It's just trash.
It's 50 kilometers away. It is now in a farmer's field.
That's right.
Somebody's backyard by their daisies and their Chinese vegetables, or the Japanese vegetables. It is in the water that dolphins and yellowfin tuna are swimming in the Pacific Ocean. They're carried by the Humboldt Current toward Alaska, British Columbia.
Well,
Washington.
it's also called the North Pacific Current, but it comes right across, basically off Honshu, where the two Japanese currents, one down and one up, meet, and then they turn east and become the North Pacific, and they go straight across and split before they hit the California, Oregon, Washington area. Half of it approximately goes north into the Gulf of Alaska, where it goes round and round counterclockwise like a toilet flush with nowhere to go. And it's starting to build up in there. It's already there. It doesn't take long for it to get here. That's why the FDA won't test one single fish.
They don't want any evidence of the crime that's being committed. In fact, I'm trying to do legal action, pro se litigant action with Ron McDonald and Dr. Fred Graves, because we've got to do something. We've got to force these agencies to start doing proper air sampling testing, food, water, and sentinel human being testing. For example, in Japan, one of the things they discovered from Chernobyl is that they could have saved many more lives if they actually marked where people were located in relation to the plant, did initial studies or tests of them, and then monitored them properly so they could have intervened before they would be overcome by infection or cancer or other conditions. None of that is happening in Japan, and we're discovering downwind huge areas where it's very radioactive because they're not disclosing it. They're not. If they are testing it, which I doubt that they are doing properly.
Well, they're not telling anybody. Here's the translation on the 50 kilometers plutonium story. It says, additionally, a certain food manufacturing company conducted a survey by themselves, and in a rice field more than 50 kilometers away from the Fukushima Daiichi power plant, it was found that there was very high radiation that is very difficult to reconcile with what the government released. It's called high-density plutonium in the translation. It's in the rice field, and it's not going away, folks. When you have plutonium like this, that means you can never go there again. It's done. And they have also radiation now. I can't tell you what isotope it is in various parts of Tokyo, topsoil. So the wind continues to be Japan's biggest immediate villain and demon right now because it carries this death wherever it goes.
Yeah, the real issue here is that And people don't want to accept this, and even they've misinterpreted my statement. I said, look, the nuclear fission age is over. Okay? But you've got to do it properly, and you have to immediately start decommissioning nuclear reactors all over the planet they're in. Tsunami zones, on fault lines, or flood zones.
You know, Bill, let me say one thing about decommissioning a plant. People think, oh, well, that's pretty neat, because if we could just get them to shut these plants down, and we wouldn't have to worry about them anymore.
This is a really big problem. In fact,
not true, folks.
Yeah.
That's right. Right.
It increases the danger unless you do it properly.
Correct.
And many of these plants can be converted over as little as 11 to 14 months to use natural gas. You drive all the things by natural gas, but eventually we have to get away from carbon-based fuels, not because carbon dioxide is a death gas from hell, but because of a thing called peak oxygen. And I coined the term because this is something that as my background in oceanography, before I went into environmental medicine, I saw that our consumption of carbon-based fuels was eventually going to result in a drop in world oxygen concentration. And we're doing a combination of two things. We're consuming more oxygen for internal combustion engines, and we're also poisoning and killing the oceans that make 80% of our world's oxygen in the upper 10 meters or 30 feet of the ocean, and we're cutting down the forests of the world. And the combination is lethal. At some point, the world's oxygen concentration is going to start dropping. Plus, life forms aren't going to tolerate the amount of acidity in the environment, the amount of pollution in the environment. That's why the oceans are dying, because of things like acid rain that's killing the coral reefs that are very sensitive. And it's not CO2, it's straight out pollution. And when you use carbon-based fuels, you will generate pollutants, and most people don't want to believe this, but all oil-based fuels are abiotic. They're not dinosaurs and ferns. You can create it in a laboratory. You can create oil-based like hydrocarbons. But 99.99% of it is from the bowels of the earth. They all contain heavy metals like arsenic, etc., and they all contain uranium.
Well, they're also, I was going to say, they're also radioactive.
Right, they're all radioactive. They all have radon, uranium, etc., thorium.
That oil coming up out of the Gulf blowout should have been tested to find out if it was young oil or old oil, and I know it would have been determined to be young oil.
Young meaning it's under 1 billion years old.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
The older the oil is, it takes a long time for it to percolate up, it's squeezed up to the top. It collects in reservoirs under the ground we call oil fields. It's old oil. There are areas in Virginia and Tennessee that are hopelessly contaminated with radioactivity from the oil industry. Nobody knows this.
Yeah, they don't want to believe the fact that you got to stop using carbon-based fuels. There's tons of geothermal energy. We do have nuclear fusion reactors. We've got what's called vortex field generators, which is the Tesla-type generator from out of the vacuum that Tom Bearden talks about. We've got wave energy. We have new types of solar and other types of energy. There is no need. The thing is, though, these technologies are miniaturized so that you could literally make a home or a group of homes completely independent of the grid. And the grid will not survive 2013. At some area of the Western Hemisphere, Southern Hemisphere, large chunks of the grid, or most of it, may be gone somewhere between 2013 and 2017 from regular and classified sources. It's not going to survive Earth changes, coronal mass ejections, and other disasters that are going to destroy the grid. The grid will not survive. And we're not preparing for any of this.
No one is doing any preparing.
They're not preparing at all. And I've talked to Canadian and U.S. and Australian experts, and they've told me that without any doubt, if you have the grid, without anything else, no nuclear war, no famine, no loss of crops, if just the grid goes, within 6 months, 90% of the population of Canada will be gone. They will die of disease, starvation, or cannibalism. Now, that's something people don't want to hear. But the movie The Road that was put out there with Viggo Mortensen, that's your future if we don't start smartening up and realize that we need to get away from nuclear energy and fission. And the Germans have got it right. Now, we've got to do it in a rational way, though. But we've got to put the money in to decommission these things properly, or they're more dangerous to decommission than just to add more safety.
Right.
That's the problem. And people misinterpret and say, oh, no, you believe in nuclear energy. No, I don't. If you start decommissioning these things wrong, you'll have Fukushimas everywhere. And then you'll be trying to move this stuff like across the ocean to, say, from Fukushima, which is too radioactive to move, to Vladivostok, and then try to dump it in Ulaanbaatar, near the capital there of Mongolia. And moving this stuff is even more dangerous. So forget about
how
the
are they
idea
going to
of
move
moving.
it? And who's going to decide that, all right, well, we're going to move the Fukushima melt down lava globs? Who's going? How are they going to pick these up, and what are they going to move them in? Can someone explain that to me?
They're going to have to invent some robot from the 24th century to come back in time that's radiation proof and can scoop this up and carry it into space.
Or transmute it, one or the other.
Yeah, this isn't going to happen. What they could do realistically is have something like a Kevlar spider silk tent they put over it and then filter the air, tunnel underneath it, try to create a catchment corium catcher underneath it, and literally have a sentinel of robots remotely operated, because human beings won't be able to be near the site or they'll die, and filter the air and prevent the water from poisoning the ocean, because if this continues, it's going to kill 1/3 of the oceans of the world, which is the Pacific Ocean. The Pacific Ocean is 1/3 of the world's ocean. Does that sound prophetic? We are killing the ocean, the great ocean, the Pacific. I mean,
right now.
Right now. But this is not like, this is theory, you're a conspiracy theorist. No. And I saw it when I saw Bunker C crude balls floating out in the ocean hundreds of miles out off the eastern coast of the United States and Canada. I saw it when I saw garbage tying up dolphins or sentient beings choking to death out in the oceans. And I'm sure that, of course, these hired killers were using these incinerating boats out there where they're killing millions of life forms out in the ocean, including great whales, like the videos that show the Japanese eating dolphin over there. They didn't want any videos about how many life forms died, or they should do a documentary of how many man-of-war jellyfish are thinking this is a new playland to come to destroy the place, because now it's jellyfish land, Gulf of Mexico.
Well,
no oxygen left. It's gone. It's a dead zone.
UC Berkeley scientists are the only institute of so-called higher education and learning that seem to be monitoring this radioactivity issue. Not one other university that I know of, certainly no government agency is doing anything. UC Berkeley now has put out its latest findings, which show conclusively that kale and strawberries and the topsoil in the Bay Area are increasing the amount of cesium and perhaps other isotopes that they're manifesting right now. So it's continually falling in the rain, and it's building up. It's bioaccumulative. It's not going away. And UC Berkeley is putting out, we've got it up at Rense.com. And you folks have to understand that pretty soon you're going to see people in supermarkets, maybe some of you already have, with handheld Geiger counters, meters. They may not read beta, alpha, and gamma, but they'll read something, and they'll be in there doing their best to try to find out what's safe and what isn't. You're going to have to put your gardens under cover. You're going to have to get into the greenhouse business here. You can do it inexpensively. We've talked about that before. But the food supply, already under siege, is really going to be in trouble very soon.
When people perceive and realize, let's say 2 years from now, not this Christmas, but maybe 2 years from now, and the only way it's going to be solved is literally we have an army of nuclear scientists and military that bring hundreds of thousands of people so they can trade spots, and an advance like a Manhattan Project to make remote-operated avatar robots that can go in as a radiation-proof, that can actually do something to at least contain it. Containment is all they can do, and they're going to have to require billions of dollars every year for centuries. This is not something that's going to go. It's going to be a monument to the nuclear industry in China and Japan forever.
And we don't know that some of the other plants are fighting right now a desperate holding battle with an equal or similar catastrophe.
Well, you know it. You know it, though, when they have reactors where here in America they're brushing it with a wire brush and they poke through a pipe.
Yeah.
But the safety procedures are not ready for earth changes. They're coming as we speak.
No, absolutely not. All right, stand by. We'll be back in just a few minutes as we continue with Dr. Bill Deagle and our update of Fukushima. Coming up at the bottom of the next hour, we're going to try and establish contact with Yoichi Shimatsu in Hong Kong. Hopefully the line is up. He said there is still underground cable trouble over there, so we will see. Stand by, and we'll be right back. Glad you're along tonight. Not pretty, but it's true, and that's what we're here for as journalists. Okay, and welcome back. Talking with Dr. Bill Deagle about a number of things. And if you want to read headlines and just get a scant idea of what's going on, just scroll down the featured story box at the top of Rense.com. It's all right there for you. Read anything you want. By the way, an A380 Airbus, what is it, Bill? I can't remember. It uses more oxygen.
Consume in 1 hour more oxygen than a full day of every living human being on the planet.
That's right. Okay.
In a day.
Now think about that, please. 1 hour of an A380 Airbus flying consumes more oxygen than every living being on the planet consumes in a day. This is something nobody understands. And that underlines your oxygen argument, which is perfect.
Yeah, we're going to hit that wall sometime in the near future because already in some of our bigger cities, the oxygen concentration is as low as 10 or 11% in some of the
That's not, that you can't function at that level. You really can't. You're functioning at half speed.
I want to return to some of the things that Chris Harris sent, because he sent me a lot. But I want to just summarize some of it because there's so much here. It's under top stories on Nutramedical and Clay and Iron. If they look at it, it's called Fukushima Daiichi and USA Reactor NRC Update. And the NRC are scrambling. The first is they stopped overseas monitoring, the NRC did, because it claimed that it was slowly stabilized. Isn't that a joke?
Yep.
So the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is not going to do overseas monitoring. Along with, of course, the EPA saying, well, we don't need to test food or kale like the UC Berkeley. We don't need to test rainwater. We don't want to frighten you with the fact that you're being boiled inside your DNA with radioisotopes. Don't worry. And, of course, 6 months or a year from now, the amount of embedded cesium, strontium, etc., that's going to accumulate and stay for hundreds of years is going to significantly be increased. And, it's beyond. Then we have, of course, the latest news that you're no longer going to be able to get Geiger-Muller tubes. You have to kind of build one yourself.
Now, what is this about? I didn't hear. So they're going to basically make Geiger counters something you can't acquire. That sounds like what you're
right now,
saying.
if you order through our Nutramedical, you can get a monitor 4 in about 6 weeks. But the sensitive ones that are 20 times more sensitive, the Inspector Pluses, you might get one in December for Christmas. You might.
No, I wouldn't hold my breath.
And the factories are kind of really amping up. The next thing, of course, is that reactor building number 4 is ready to crash and then spew off in the air and water a giant cloud of radiation. Reactor 3 is ready to go nuclear. 1 and 2, we know, are giving off so much radioisotopes to the water through the intake vents. I mean, a lot of people know these things, but if you just go over all these facts,
right.
TEPCO claims that fuel reached 28 times the boiling water or 6,000 degrees. TEPCO claimed that their fuel melted down. They also say that they're finally releasing the report in Reactor 1. It was actually broken, the reactor pressure vessel, before the tsunami hit.
Mm-hmm.
So these buildings have no structural integrity right now.
And you got three meltdowns, admittedly.
Right, and if they fill up these buildings, which was their plan, to fill them up with water around the reactor, the concrete structures are going to rupture. We're going to have a massive release of radiation. Now, what does that mean for us? It means we in North America are being bathed with radiation, and it goes right over us and right to Europe and around the northern hemisphere. And people think, I don't think people grasp how serious is this. We're going to see a massive increase in birth defects, diseases of every kind.
Well, it's going to be depleted uranium, but amped up.
Oh, well, much worse. Depleted uranium is toxic. Plutonium is 20,000